Okay, in this video I'm going to introduce Pythagorean Theorem, and we're going to look at the formula and talk about why it works, and also we're going to come up with some shortcut formulas to use when we're solving problems. So basically, Pythagorean Theorem states that if you know two sides of a right triangle, you can figure out the third side. And we know that there are three sides to a triangle. Now, Pythagorean Theorem only works with right triangles, and a right triangle is a triangle with a 90-degree angle. This little box indicates that this angle is 90 degrees. Now, the longest side of a right triangle is called the hypotenuse, and that is always going to be labeled with a C. Notice that I labeled the other two sides with A and B, and it's kind of arbitrary where the A goes or where the B goes, but C has to be the hypotenuse. Additionally, the hypotenuse will always be opposite the 90-degree angle. Okay, so the formula for Pythagorean Theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So if we were to square a, which is 6, and square b, which is 8, if we squared those numbers and took the sum of those squares, it would be equal to the square of side C, or the 10. And so I just plugged in the numbers just to show you how that works. 6 squared is 36, 8 squared is 64. If I were to add those two together, I would get 100. And that indeed matches what's on this side. The 10 squared is also 100. So we're not actually going to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared when we're problem solving. Instead, we're going to create shortcut formulas using this original formula. We're going to derive some other formulas and use those when we do our problem solving. So let's get I'm going to get a piece of paper, and you can do the problems with me if you'd like, or just watch along. So I'll go ahead and write out the formula first. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And we want to solve for a. Okay, we just want a, not a squared. Well, if you remember in a previous lesson, for solving for an unknown variable, our goal is to isolate our variable that we're looking to solve for. And we're going to use inverse or opposite operations. If we do something on one side of the equation, the equal sign, we have to do it to the other side. So let's go ahead and do that. Here we're going to subtract b squared from both sides. And I'll just rewrite it. A squared equals c squared minus b squared. Now notice that we do have the a on one side of the equal sign and everything else is on the right. However, that a is squared, and we only really want to know what a is, not a squared. So what we're going to do is take the square root, because that's the inverse of squaring. So we'll take the square root of this, but we also have to take the square root of the other side. Now what's going to happen is this: taking the square root of a squared number essentially eliminates that exponent, and so we can rewrite it as a. Now because we have an operation going on underneath the square root symbol, even though we've got exponents here, we can't cross those out. So we're just going to rewrite that square root c squared minus b squared. And this would be, oops, I've got two. This would be our shortcut formula for a. Now let's solve for b. So I'm going to rewrite that. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, and we want to solve for b. Again, we want to isolate and use inverse and keep the balance, so I'm going to subtract a squared from both sides. We're left with b squared equals c squared minus a squared. Again, like the last problem, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. That's going to cancel that exponent, that second power, and I'm left with b equals the square root of c squared minus a squared. And that will be our formula for solving for the b side. The last one is when we want to solve for the c side. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And you notice that the c is already on one side of the equal sign. The only thing we need to get rid of is this exponent. So if I take the square root of both sides, that is going to eliminate it. Now, you might think, well, that c should be on the other side. It's okay if you write it like this, but you can certainly change it. Just flip it over, and we've got square root of a squared plus b squared equals c. Okay, so before we end the video, let's just take a quick look at these answers here. Notice that when you're solving for a and b, it's going to be a subtraction problem. So here and here. Also notice that in your the first letter underneath your square root is going to be the c squared. Okay, the c squared is going to be the larger side, and so when you take away a smaller amount from a larger amount, you're going to get a positive number there. Otherwise, that would mess you up. The only formula or shortcut formula that is addition is when you're solving for the c side. Okay, in the next video we'll do a couple of examples. I'm going to show you how to format the homework and also how to write things, or well, basically how to format the homework.